Remember that one we found last year? That was it was a deadhead.
Oh, in the middle of the water?
Stuck out in a tree, and we didn't know how deep the water was, but I was out of my pants before you knew it.
I have that effect on you.
Wading out there. I asked Colton, I said, "Are you impressed with how fast I got these pants off?"
And we're back.
Hey.
Welcome to the HUNTR Podcast, episode 62, as Colty keeps us in line.
February 17th.
Yeah, man.
Today.
Chugging through. Not a leap year this year, so right? Just 11 more days in the month. That doesn't work.
I don't think so.
No, I think it's just 11 more days. And then March.
Yep.
Official. I know people are picking up sheds now. I get it.
Yeah, dude, they're going. A lot of mine are off.
Yeah, we've eyeballed that big 3-year-old for a while, but a week now.
It's got to be him, dude. I was kicking myself. I think I was a couple days too late getting it in there just because the first time he showed back up after being gone for a few weeks. I'm assuming it's him. There's a couple other bucks it could be, I guess, but yeah, the antlers are gone. So they're either, maybe
they're
on
close
on the property. So yeah, we're gonna walk. I'm gonna try to go Sunday, I think.
They're close. I mean, because that time frame right before was really cold. I don't think those deer were moving much. They were locked down on a food source.
They definitely were, because it's bizarre looking at that corn pile is gone. It was I put like 300 pounds out, and I put 300 pounds in another spot too, which was pretty close to a cornfield, few hundred yards.
Yep.
And they've barely touched it. Barely touched it.
They're just not moving much. I mean, it's all about retaining energy, and storing calories. And if they move, they've got to offset that in feed that's going to replace those calories.
Wear a t-shirt here today. I didn't even put a hoodie on.
I know, it was warm out.
It's like 60 degrees today.
Oh, we were gone.
At least 50. We
were gone for a chunk of this week, and it was last couple of days. It's been in like the mid-50s in the Midwest.
Yeah, it's been beautiful. Feels like shed hunting weather.
It's going to happen.
And we might be going back to Kansas.
It's the plan. We're going to look at...
all you got to do is look at the calendar.
Late March.
Pick a spot. Pick a spot, make a plan, execute the plan.
Pick a spot, find the right timing to break it to my wife, execute.
It is late, I mean, if better late than early, I suppose. But if they're shedding early February, we're not looking until maybe the third week of March.
Yeah, and I mean, we've talked about this a lot in terms of shed hunting. And again, when I had time or like I would just go, and usually way too early, and I'd put a lot of miles on. And let's be honest, I mean, odds are if you go and walk like every square inch of a property, you're probably not going to do it again during the same season.
Sure.
Just how it is. So, we tend to now shed hunt later to try to make sure that
especially
we're
when
giving
it's
them
15
all.
hours away.
Yeah,
we want to cover as much ground as possible. We're not
walking around home.
We're not walking it twice.
Yeah, like you're not going to go walk your entire parents' farm.
Can't be done.
Yeah. So it's just if
we have a hard enough time covering the good spots as it is.
So if you're gonna make the effort, I'd rather go later, unless per like what you're seeing, if like that buck's coming to a food source or corn pile or whatever,
go get 'em.
And then next thing you know, they're gone. Which if I had been down there, that 10 point that I've been watching, whether it's a 2 or 3-year-old in Kentucky, I watched him drop one next day, like I'm talking freshy.
So valuable, man. It's you can set it up, just like you'd set up a an ambush point during the rut or October. You can set up a trail camera, especially in states where you can bait or you've got a really solid food source that they're coming to religiously. You can find shed antlers in the same fashion. They're not going to be too terribly far from where that buck's coming on a daily basis.
Well, and if we want to get to the puritives out there, they're like, nah, just get into a big thing of big woods and just walk. And it's like, yeah, dude, that sucks. And you can walk a lot, and I have.
Yeah, don't get us wrong. How many miles did we put on in Kansas last year in 2-3 days? It was 20 or 30 miles.
It was more than that. It was like, mid-30s. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we walk a lot.
We walked.
Whether it's in Kansas, I mean, I shed hunted in.
And we walk a lot of public land, too. That's where you see that post I made this morning? We found 2 80-inch sheds. One of them sitting right here, and one's at Antlers by Klaus last year on public land.
Yeah, I walked the David Boone National Forest. I walked, I think it was 17 miles in 2 days in Kentucky last year, and I didn't find a freaking shed. We shed hunted Illinois, and we did all of Shawnee, and Colty found one like chewed up son of a bitch, and that may have been all we found.
Yeah, we found a handful. Not a lot. We found some oldies, which was weird.
Yeah, no freshies out there.
And it was late then, too, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Mid-March at least.
Yep. So, yeah, I think as you look into it,
maybe March 3rd.
Your birthday?
Because we're always going around my birthday.
Maybe.
I'm always trying to gauge it off of that.
Yeah. I think the thing is that if you can and you're not worried, given if you're shed hunting public like we are in Kansas, we're going to concede to several sheds, meaning they've dropped in January or February, and somebody's going to find them by the time we get there the third week of March. It just will happen. But if you knew the good spots or you're shed hunting private, push it off to mid-March. And that way when you make your pass, odds are there's not many packing still.
Yeah. Or you'll find some that guys aren't willing to go out and get. Remember that one we found last year that was it was a deadhead?
Oh, in the middle of the water?
Stuck out in a tree, and we didn't know how deep the water was, but I was out of my pants before you knew it.
I have that effect on you.
Waiting out there. I asked Colton, I said, are you impressed with how fast I got these pants off? Yeah. And we left it there like you idiots. We hung it up thinking we were going to come back.
Well, we thought we knew who it was. We're like, ugh! And then it wasn't.
Yeah, after 35 miles, I was like, hey, I'm happy with these 280-inch sheds. I don't want to walk.
That's because a couple years before, I put a deadhead on my back and the brain juice stripped all over my backpack the entire night.
It's commitment. It's commitment. Yeah, that's
smelly.
That smelled.
So anyways, this episode, our guest are Jared and I. Just us.
Sorry.
Sorry to disappoint you.
The truth is, we're supposed to have Jeremy Eldridge on today.
Yeah, Hoyt. Yep, VP marketing for Hoyt.
Yeah, I think the vid got him.
He got the COVID. So finally kind of caught up to him, and so we had to push Jeremy a couple more weeks, but we do have him scheduled coming up. Next week's podcast will be Brian Burhams, who is the executive director of the Pennsylvania Game Commission. We'll have Brian on remotely.
I'm super excited about that one.
Oh, it should be a really good conversation with Brian to really kind of dig into the agency side and build on what we had a great conversation with Matt Moret, I think. And if you haven't looked at that, go back and check out one of our early podcasts with Matt Moret here in studio.
Yeah. And, you've got more experience, I suppose, in the agency realm of things, but and we're not looking to grill Brian by any means.
Nope.
Or Matt, but I think we are looking for some transparency in terms of some of the conversations we've had and what we've learned in terms of goals of hunters to invest in land and wildlife and, have quality of opportunities versus, maybe an approach that, in this case, Pennsylvania, but all states are taking the information that they're looking at and how they're making decisions on those types of things.
Well, and I think one of the, we've brought it up in several conversations is that, transparently ask Brian, are you worried that there are too many people hunting public land in Pennsylvania? Are we stuffing the political boundaries with too many hunters?
It's funny, man. At this this little deal we were at here this past week, it's interesting to hear just whether the misconceptions or just the questions around are there enough hunters or too many hunters? And it's a very split bag.
Well, and what's interesting is Brian knows every year what is happening in terms of hunting license. He sees it. The data comes into him, right?
This is proprietary information as of now, right? We don't know this. And Brian knows it.
Yeah. I mean, that's what it seems like.
Maybe he'll share with us a little bit.
Maybe it is in the public domain. I don't know. The reason this big discussion came up is that, U.S. Fish and Wildlife released these data points looking at 2004, 2005 compared to 2019 or 20. And it was oh, we're growing. We're growing in numbers. Mm-hmm. The states are seeing this every year. Right? They get a report at the end of the year and says, so many people bought a hunting license, so many people bought an archery license, so many people bought a bear license.
And yet, over the past 5 years, you've got this mad dash to educate and recruit new hunters.
Yep. And that's not a bad thing. There is a need for new generation of hunters because as we get older, who's going to follow in the footsteps? The question I think I have is around, I guess, the retention. Seems like we're doing a good job. If our hunter numbers are growing, I would assume that we're doing a pretty good job at retaining hunters. And then the reactivation, which is people who stopped hunting, who came back to hunting. Well, COVID did that for us. No campaigns around it. COVID reactivated those inactive hunters to come back into the fold. Now, I said this when we were into COVID, it's a false high, right? As life goes back to normal, they go back to going to concerts and to sporting events and to, bars and whatever else, right? That's more important than hunting. But in the moment when there was none of that, COVID reactivated a lot of people into hunting. So we're going to have to balance that out. But in the midst of that, we activated multiple Sunday hunting opportunities in Pennsylvania. How'd that affect harvest? How did that affect hunter numbers? Can we make a statement of it?
I really think that, and I'm not saying it's bad or good, but I really think that the introduction of crossbow seasons overlapping with archery seasons has had a massive influence on how people approach a season, and based on what weapon they're taking into the field.
We see it. I mean, we beat on Kansas a lot, just because that's kind of the prime example. Is that when I started hunting Kansas 8 or 9 years ago, every year there were less applicants than there were tags. 100%. That means 100% success. If you applied for a bow tag in a unit, you got a tag because there were less applicants than tags allocated. Then it got to about 97%, 95%. I mean, you're pretty much guaranteed. Pretty much guaranteed. And if you probably weren't guaranteed your first tag unit, you got your second tag unit. Last year, when we didn't draw, it was about a 72% success rate. There's a massive overflow of applications to the number of allocations for tags in the units.
Mm-hmm. I'd be interested
and that's for bow hunting. This is purely for bow hunting, right? And so is there really that many more compound bow hunters coming in? Is it more crossbow hunters? What is it?
I wonder if, I'm sure that information's out there. I'm sure it is. Because isn't there a survey what's the percentage of people who take the survey? But
I think the big thing around state agencies, and this is something that, since I was in my master's degree or bachelor's degree, even, we had a lot of discussions about, and because I was very active in the scientific community, but I also was a hunter first and foremost, is that there's a bridge that tends to be broken between agencies and even the scientific community and the general hunting public, which is why, again, not to call people out, but there's a lot of hunting influencers who are educating the hunting public who should not be educating the general public. They don't know what the hell they're talking about. But because the scientific community and the state agencies do such a piss poor job at getting to the general hunting community, those influencers are the ones who are in their face day in and day out. And you obviously have really good ones like Jeff Sturgis or Ali DeAndrea that are doing accurate stuff, factual-based things. There are some opinionated things, especially from Jeff. We see that a lot when we talk about the bow stuff. But when it comes to the management and things that's going on, like it's pretty much rooted in some sort of science and facts. But then you've got the TV guy, and it's not all of them because there's a bunch of really good ones. But you got a lot of these guys who are basically saying, well, here's how you're gonna age this 5-year-old buck. Like, look at his face. He's got a Roman nose. False. That's bullshit. That is not accurate. I've seen 1-year-olds with a Roman nose. And it's just, that's the information that us as the community hang on to. And it's not right. It's false. But because the agencies and the universities, from a scientific standpoint, do such a bad job at getting their knowledge to the general hunting public, who else are they going to listen to? And it's the age-old story. When the first, and building momentum towards Brian's podcast here next week, the first agency to really, really, really step out of that box, right? And I'm not saying just the first, but in an area that was territory, was back in the early 2000s when Gary Alt, who was the deer program coordinator for the Pennsylvania Game Commission, went around and said, okay, guys, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do concurrent buck-doe seasons because we think there are too many deer in these areas. And then we're going to implement antler restrictions, and that's going to protect a bunch of our 1-year-old bucks to get them to 2. And the guy was literally, him, his kids, his wife, were threatened to death multiple times. Guy would have to wear a bulletproof vest to go into a high school to say, here's what we're going to do because we think this is going to make deer hunting better in Pennsylvania. I mean, death threats from it. But it wasn't just because of the change that Gary Alt wanted to make in the state of Pennsylvania, it was because the state of Pennsylvania and most agencies never communicated to the public. So when they finally came out and said, hey guys, here's what we're going to do, it was so foreign that it's like, who the hell are you? Who are you to tell me that you're going to change the way that I live my life and my passion and my hobby or whatever? And it's because it's infrequent. And we see that at the university level. I know Bronson Strickland and Steve Damaris and Carl Miller and Craig Harper, these guys are doing a better job at it. But where we were this week, our buddy Matt Joyce bought Craig Harper's book on early successional fields and things like that. That book is a Bible for habitat management. I don't care if you're in Minnesota. I don't care if you're in Mississippi. And I bet 9 out of 10 people listening to this podcast don't even know exists, because Craig's university is not facilitated to market that to the general hunting public. They just aren't. And yet there are people who are not knowledgeable in the situation who are telling the general hunting public, the people actually implementing stuff, this is how you do it. And it's not correct. You know, and we talked about the problems of the industry. This isn't, I don't blame the industry for this. I blame the state agencies and I blame the universities, in that you have the funds and you have the platform. Choose not to use it. And a great question for Brian, and a tough one probably for him to answer, is going to be, hey, Brian, like we asked to have one of the deer program coordinators on the show. They're not allowed to talk on the show. Why? They're the expert. Why can't they talk to us? I know the reason. It's because, you know, they say something wrong or they get put on the spot. Like, they don't want to be put in that position. They're a biologist. I get that, as am I. But, like, why can't I talk to them? States like Missouri and Mississippi, the guys you run into the field and you talk to and you shake their hand and they tell you, like, how things are going, that's a deer biologist for the state, in the field, meeting a hunter at the hunt club, age and jawbones. But then there's states like Pennsylvania that they're behind closed doors. They're not allowed to interact with the public. I think that's a problem. I think it's a big problem. And I get why, but it's a serious issue that, again, the point of our podcast is to have these difficult discussions. And we will with Brian, but, you know, it's something that I've always been passionate about, because when I went into school and I came out of school, I wanted to be better at communicating from the scientific level to the general hunting public level. That was my goal when I got into school, and when I came out, it was like, I'm going to be that guy that can help bridge the gap. I wrote for Deer and Deer Hunting. I wrote for Whitetail News. I wrote for North American Whitetail, and I was trying to pull factual information, which is why we give Ben Rising and Adam Hayes and stuff a hard time about, like, moon phase, because I've wrote in those magazines that all the data says it's BS, right? But it's because the people who are collecting that data are putting out publications within their peer sphere, but it never reaches the mass hunting public. And that's a problem. And, you know, we're not the solution to it. It's just, we're going to poke the problem until somebody addresses it, basically. So anyways, rant over. But yeah.
Yeah, no. Hey, yeah.
But I mean, think about it. Like, when
I agree. Yeah,
as a deer hunter, right? Who you and I have hunted,
I'd like some communication. Sure.
Pennsylvania, Ohio, Kentucky, Illinois, Kansas, North Dakota, South Dakota. Okay, let's just use those 7. You've hunted more. How many times have you talked to a deer biologist from one of those states?
Never, to my knowledge.
There you go. Seems pretty. I would consider yourself a pretty passionate hunter and somebody who's very involved.
Yeah.
Do you know who the deer biologists for any of those states are?
No.
There you go.
No.
Problem, right? This is the stuff that I've seen a lot of my career. Because back to the conversation you and I had, who's making the decisions?
What is the main problem that you're trying to get at? And
communication.
That's resulting in what? So so just treat me like the hunter.
Mm-hmm.
How am I being affected by lack of communication?
Ask me a question about what we were just talking about, crossbows. Hey, how are the crossbows affecting, the archery season?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose literally somebody would say, hey, man, I'm seeing a lot of crossbow hunters.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like it.
Okay. What don't you like about it?
Hypothetically. There's just a lot more people in the woods.
Mm-hmm. You think they're killing more deer?
I know they are.
Do you have the data to support that?
On my own property, yeah.
How about on a landscape level?
Well,
that's how we manage deer.
I can talk to hunters though, and that's the perception.
But
I think that's where
the data,
I think that's where anger comes from.
The data is there, but you don't have it. You don't have access to it. It exists, and it's presented in, hey, here's the
Isn't it? You don't think we can go on and find the number of like new vertical bow versus compound bow hunters in Pennsylvania?
I bet it's not in any public press release. They have it, and they, I think, are by law supposed to divulge it to us in a public record because that's what it is.
Google that, Colton.
But I think
see if you can find an official publication that says anything about different types of.
I know the one that I looked at recently was the really nice release of Ohio deer harvest, and it had because there's more archery harvest than gun harvest in the state of Ohio. And then it had buck and antlerless, and then counties. Not how many by crossbow, not how many by compound bow. Because that's a very sensitive subject to put into the public.
I suppose, the last thing that was really people were upset by was the antler restrictions in Pennsylvania. That would have been the thing.
That was Gary.
Yeah,
yep.
that if during that time, unless I was already on board with that, which statistically I wouldn't have been, that's something I would have wanted communicated to about. I mean, did it happen at that time?
That was the first guy who went around the entire state to high schools, to fire halls, to sportsmen's clubs, got up on stage and said, here's why we're doing it.
Did crossbow introduction into archery seasons happen before or after that?
In Pennsylvania, way after, like within the last 4 or 5 years.
And was there communication at that time? I mean, it would be those major changes that I think would warrant communication. A public meeting?
With the commission.
Where's that?
Harrisburg.
Who goes to that?
Not many.
Who's invited to that? Anybody?
Some of them are open to the public. Some of them are not. Some of them are closed door. Some of them are online, streamed.
I mean, that's the thing as a hunter and an individual landowner. Like, I don't want to go to every meeting. I don't want to be involved in any of it. I want to be able to manage, my property and the surrounding landscape in a way that.
I'll give you a good example. Let's just keep using. Let's use Ohio instead of Pennsylvania. We beat up on them a little bit. And I know Mike Tonkovich, who is the deer program leader in Ohio, super guy. He and Emily did a lot of work together when she was in Missouri as the deer biologist. And so if you're thinking about your farm or my farm, right? My concern would be, man, there's a lot of crossbow guys in the woods during archery season. If Mike or somebody at the department would say, well, you're right, Jeremy, here's the number of people that said they
and that's on a micro level. That's just literally an individual opinion of saying, hey, seems like a lot of bucks that I'm seeing at the beginning of the season are getting killed by the end of it with crossbows, and they didn't used to. Well,
and so give me the numbers to say I'm wrong or right. Here, hey Jared, here there were 100,000 bucks killed during the season. 75,000 of those were killed with a compound bow. 25,000 were killed with a crossbow. You would probably say, okay, yeah, that's a quarter.
I've never been one to trust numbers from the government.
But you have to, man. See, that's what I'm saying. Is like the reason
you look at COVID. Though.
I know, but the reason you don't trust
2 positive PCR tests and 2 negative.
Yeah,
in a single day.
The reason you don't trust those numbers is because the communication is not consistent to where you feel like you can trust those numbers. It's so infrequent that you're given total harvest, archery harvest, gun harvest, maybe youth season harvest, and then buck stows.
I mean, dude, I can follow the money and I can see the influence. That's where my distrust would come from.
Okay,
not just in frequency of communication. They can lie to me all they want, 5 times a day, and and if you have the sense to follow the money or have conversations to see where influence is impacting those decisions, it's like, I say that. I get it.
In terms of like lobbyists?
No, in terms of like the Game Commission wanting to make more money via license sales, which they need opportunity, which they need license sales. License sales don't benefit hunters directly and individual landowners. So they benefit the Game Commission, which benefits public land in theory.
So let's break this down, because this is going to be really important when we get into, because I don't want to beat Brian up about this stuff. Like, let's lay this as a foundational piece of it.
Why not?
Well, it's just because, like, I think there's questions that are going to come from this that are the ones we want to talk. But if people understand, all right, how does a state agency like the Pennsylvania Game Commission make money, right? Number one is through license sales, okay? Number two is that through federal funds, like Pittman-Robertson Fund, in which they basically are looking at the number of licensed hunters in the state, as well as the available acreage of like public land opportunity in the state. It's like a factor basically to say, okay, you get X amount of federal funding. So for a state like Pennsylvania, which has a lot of open public lands and huntable opportunities on that side, the goal would be more hunters, more money. Okay. Where it gets very, very cloudy in this state is that we are still one of the few that has wildlife separated from fish, separated from DCNR. We have 3 separate agencies that manage the resources in this state. Most states have a DCNR, a DNR. They do not have a Fish Commission, Game Commission, Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, which is your forestry arm. And so think about the amount of money, and if there's somebody listening that's working for these 3 entities, this is where they'll crucify me. Think about the 3 entities and the amount of overlap and personnel between having game wardens, fish wardens, and also state forest or state park police. Okay. Versus having statewide fish and wildlife wardens. Okay. That's number one. Number 2 is think about the amount of administration work. I don't use this as a discrimination. Secretaries, accounting, executives, whatever. So Brian is executive for the Pennsylvania Game Commission. There is also an executive for the Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission. In most states, that's the same person. But now we're paying 2 people as the state taxpayers.
Sure. Yeah, but I mean, is it really that much money in the grand scheme of things?
Yes. A lot more money that could go into the fish and wildlife of the state.
I mean,
I bet it's millions of dollars.
$500,000. How many executives are you talking?
Several. I mean, dude, the entire, and I'm not saying to a T, but much of the Fish and Boat Commission, the one thing I would be in favor of combining is law enforcement. There's never enough wardens to cover the area. And I know people are going to be like, oh, damn game warden. Blah, blah, blah. No, there's never enough law enforcement. Like if somebody trespasses or they enforce a no baiting law, and those guys bust their ass, don't get me wrong, there's not enough of them to physically be effective at doing it. So I would be all for having a larger group of law enforcement in that side.
Sure.
But in terms of and same would be with biologists. Like you're not going to have a trout biologist as also your deer biologist, right? 2 separate people, 2 separate roles. But when you get into the administration side of this thing, it's a mirror image. There are all of these people on payroll who also do the same thing as all of these people on payroll, who also do the same thing as all of these people on payroll, because there's 3 different agencies. It's a lot of overlap of money and overhead.
Yeah. I mean, well, dude, and at the same time, I mean, I guess, how do you think that all of that is? I guess it's a perception thing too, but I mean, dude, some people are killing big bucks in Pennsylvania enough that like I'm excited to bring it home, you know, and start doing the same.
Yes. And
that doesn't seem to line up with, and I think I know the answer. I mean, I don't think they're the same thing. These are, and there's some public land stuff, you know, there's Allegheny National Forest
some giants, some improvements. Steve Shirk's killing giants.
But around here, I mean, a lot of the big deer that are, you know, the mature deer that are getting killed are private land.
100%.
And I don't know that even this conversation we're talking about has that big of an influence on that, or if they're different things.
What it does, because each of those agencies exist independently, that means each of them have to bring in X amount of dollars independently to thrive. Whereas a merged agency, like Missouri Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, merged agency. Ohio Department of Natural Resources, merged agency. Can bring all of that money into one agency and be able to function. We are dividing that money into 3 separate agencies.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, other than the antler restriction, let's say, however many years ago that was, what has this agency, even though it's compartmentalized, done to, or would correlate with the fact that guys are killing bigger bucks on public land in this part of the state? It would seem the other way, in our conversation around crossbows, which leads me to believe maybe they aren't as correlated.
They want more hunters in the state. It's clear.
Okay.
So, you would think that it would be...
Do you see what I'm saying, though?
Yeah. I mean, they teed off... This is where it comes back
like we're kind of saying, hey, Game Commission is structured incorrectly. Hey, Game Commission is not helping, what our goal would be for deer hunting in Pennsylvania. And yet, it's our perception that, bigger, more mature deer are getting killed primarily on private land, but maybe also public land. And those two conversations don't seem to be moving in the same direction.
So I think first of all, track back. I think the Game Commission is not managing for bigger bucks, but in the pursuit of what they wanted to do, even if you have to credit it 20 years ago, the reason there are bigger bucks is because of what they did in 2000, 2001, 2002. And the concurrent,
that would be the antler restriction?
Yeah, and concurrent buck-to-doe harvest and allocation management of deer. Basically, we need to balance the amount of deer in an area. There are I don't think anybody would argue that there are less deer now than there were in the early 2000s in the state of Pennsylvania. There just are, for sure.
Okay.
Because the Game Commission aimed for herd reduction, right? That was the goal. The goal wasn't, hey, Jared, I'm going to do this to help you make bigger bucks. The goal was there are too many deer to support in these areas for healthy habitat. Now, how they got there is a whole different discussion that many people probably won't agree with, somewhat myself. But because they looked at herd reduction, right? Less deer, more resources per deer, better deer. So even though their goal is very much tied to the habitat and very much tied to the opportunity for hunters.
I think that quality of habitat is important because some of those things are not directly aiming at herd reduction. Like an antler restriction is not going to get more deer killed. It's going to get less deer killed.
Correct. It's going to protect your bucks.
But if you have the quality of habitat to support the deer that do make it through, living to an older age.
When and it was the year before that antler restriction went in place, concurrent seasons came in. So before that, 2 weeks of buck season, 3 days of doe season. No overlap. Before that, concurrent seasons hit right away. So the reduction was taking place prior to the retention of bucks into older age classes.
What do you got here, Colton? Resident opinions on deer populations 2011 versus 2019.
So there you go. So basically, in 2011, everybody is saying
too high,
too low of deer populations. So that would have been 10 years after concurrent and herd reductions. And then we backed off of that. It went to a week of buck, a week of doe. For a while there, it was the full 2 weeks were concurrent.
This is just all residents, like a general survey?
Yep, general survey. And so then it also went to, for a while there, in most counties, there were some counties that were still overlapped, like Allegheny and stuff, but most were 1 week of antlered only, and then the second week started concurrent buck or doe.
So, I mean, this is indicating that, like, on the far eastern and western parts of Pennsylvania, that people think that there are a lot more deer now than there was then. But for a lot of the central part of the state, a lot of people think there are less deer than there were in 2011 by moving from light green to dark green. Or is
no,
it's
the other way. So they think that there's basically they're saying in 2019,
more.
We think
around.
There's more deer in Pennsylvania than there were in 2011.
And it's a survey. It's a survey. I mean, that's impacted by who's answering the survey. First of all,
I'd argue with that to say that that's incorrect.
Well,
I bet and we're not going to know, right? I mean, we don't know the actual number of deer, right? It's just a survey. I bet based on the way it's situated,
keep scrolling down.
There are less there are less deer in the state of Pennsylvania in 2019 than there were in 2011. And there are definitely less deer in both of those than there were in 2001 when we did the first concurrent season, or 2000. I can't remember what year it was.
Keep scrolling.
What do you got here? Deer hunter's opinion. What's this one? Oh, 2020. Everybody's saying it's too low.
This makes no sense. Keep scrolling. Because it's the same in 2011.
Chronic Ways thing.
There you go.
Yeah, so there's your CWD, which is a whole different
I like Deer Brian's opinion on that. That's something I don't know a whole lot about, but I know there's a lot of controversy over.
Lots.
Controversy?
Controversy? What's this one? Regular firearm season. This is where...
In 2001, a 12-day concurrent antler-to-antlerless firearm season begun. The objectives of this longer antlerless season were to give hunters more time to hunt antlerless deer and to create a more consistent harvest from year to year. Antlerless locations in each WMU determined antler harvest. Beginning in 2008, some WMUs were changed to a 5-day antlered-only season, followed by a 7-day concurrent antlered and antlerless season. In 2010, 11, 14, 15, and 17, additional WMUs were changed to the 5-7 season format. By 2019, only 2B, 5C, and 5D had a 2-week concurrent antlerless season. Well, dude, and 2B starts 2 weeks earlier than anybody else, too, indicating that a lot of these people think there's still too many deer.
Yeah, well, and what's interesting...
Is it just 2B? Who else has that?
Philly area, which is 5C, 5D.
Okay.
The other thing that's interesting about this, so this map is showing that original 14-day concurrent season in 2001. 2021, it was the same. We were back to a 14-day concurrent season, meaning they're trying to kill more deer off right now. Interesting.
It'd be interesting to compare to a state like Ohio, who has a long archery season and a lot of guys starting to participate in that. I mean, dude, it comes in like September 29th and does not stop until February 7th.
And I think a lot of it is deer habitat, the amount of deer habitat in Ohio versus Pennsylvania, parcel size, and then pure number of hunters.
Yeah.
Yep. It's 250,000 or 300,000 less. It's almost double in Pennsylvania, the amount of hunters. So anyways, not to throw everybody off track there, but what I'm trying to get to is the big thing that from a state agency side, and really from our podcast side, it doesn't matter who we're talking to, but is to kind of, ask the tough questions and have the tough discussions that, oftentimes just aren't brought up. And so for instance, I don't want to sit there and run spreadsheets and calculate numbers, but and he may not have them, but hey, Brian, how many deer during archery season this year were killed with a crossbow? How many deer were killed with a vertical or compound bow?
I'd shoot him an email before he comes. He's coming in person next week?
Virtual.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know that.
And do they have the numbers yet? That's the other thing.
The numbers. Show us the numbers.
So I think it'll be interesting to see that. And it's just... we get into this all the time. Deer hunting and deer management, land ownership. It's an emotional thing, right? And there's still plenty of people out there who just blame the Pennsylvania Game Commission for everything, or blame QDMA for everything. And it's like, change. Yeah, people don't like change. We get that. But you have to. It's cool. I wish I could still be paying $1.25 at the pump, and I'm paying $4. Yeah, I hate change. Cool. What are you going to do about it? This is where it is. And so you can complain about somebody coming in and making a change, but change is always going to happen. It's a constant evolution. It is just going to continue to happen. How you respond to it, how you embrace it is one thing. Now, that's not to say a John Eberhart, who literally went up and opposed the crossbows in Michigan. And he did something to try to stop that. Now, it didn't stop, but he did enough to try to stop something from that. And so, how many couch warriors are here sitting saying, yeah, Pennsylvania Game Commission sucks, whatever. Cool, what are you doing about it? You calling your local rep? You writing them? You writing the board? You just bitching to your buddies? Great. What are you going to do? Do something. Do something about it. Make an action. Talk to them. Maybe get more facts that you may go back. Brian may come on here and show us facts, and we're like, damn, sorry. You're right, man. Game Commission's doing what it's supposed to do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, dude, how can anybody like listening to this or even you and I get, be involved in those conversations?
I mean,
how does the public speak to, I mean, or do you look to organizations like, at one time the QDMA or now the NDA to kind of like speak on behalf of hunters? And like, what is the...
Most do. Most of you have that as your organization in the front, but nobody will take you serious unless you try to talk to somebody, and it's usually from a state representative side.
And dude, the reality is like most people don't have time. They have 9 to 5s, they have mortgages, they have families. Like who has time to spend this time getting involved in these conversations? Which
is why, circle back to the beginning, I don't think there's enough information coming from these agencies to us to have. We're going to have to go dig for it. If you want to know the difference between how many deer were killed with a crossbow versus a vertical bow in Ohio in 2021, you're going to have to dig for it. And you're probably going to have to write them, and you're probably going to have to ask, and it's going to take a while, and eventually, maybe, you get the information. I would like to see more transparency from them. And I get why. It's a PR move, right? Why do I want to put something in a number that you may look at one way, I may look at another, and I say, man, that's right. And you're like, are you crazy? Did you see these numbers?
What do you think? And I know we're running out of time here, but like in the West, like, dude, there are spreadsheets and spreadsheets and spreadsheets about like harvest, and it's primarily like, number of harvests, per a certain area. I don't know if it goes much deeper than that, but I don't know if we do we have that here, and what do you think about those Western states doing that?
Very transparent, just a low number of hunters, so they don't get the kickback. A Montana might see, I don't know, 150,000 hunters in a year. They just don't get the kickback,
and that's because they're choosing to limit it.
Via points for non-residents, and then even in the resident aspect, like we were down with our buddies in Arizona not too long ago. And they're residents of Arizona, and they're like, yeah, we didn't draw any tags to hunt this year. I was like, so what do? They're like, squirrels. Like, we didn't draw. We're residents. We didn't draw.
Interesting.
So they limit it.
Yeah, I know guys in Montana that can't hunt their elk units every year. Like
100%.
Yeah.
So it's limitations. And I think that's the bigger picture is that if you look at how the situation is playing out for, and when we talk about a lot of these, we're not talking about the West, obviously, but we are talking about most of the major whitetail states, right? The big heavy hitters. There is a very, very, very small amount of transparency coming out. And I understand why. It's because you give this fact out there, it's twisted 16 different ways. By the time it comes back to you, you've ruined deer hunting in the state of X. But like we are the constituents. We are the public. We own the public resource. As a whole, those deer are all of ours. We deserve the open information, the open dialogue to it. And without, to your point, we're super busy, without having to go and hunt it down and ask 5 people and jump through loops. It should be as much as here are all the statistics for the state of Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin for 2021. There you go. And we can make our own conclusions from it.
Well, dude, let's ask for them. And if we can get them, we'll promote them.
Okay.
Pretty straightforward. And if they don't give them to us, we'll tell you.
Yeah. It's not, guys, don't take this as like a beat down on the agency side, because first of all, I have a ton of friends in agency formats. My wife worked for a state agency for almost 6 years. It's that we want to continue to reveal and ask the questions, and I see that gap. I've stared at that gap since I started school in 2003. I've seen the gap between scientific, government, and the general hunting population. And in some states they do a great job, and they have closed that gap, and they do a great job of communicating. Mississippi, shout out to my old guys at Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fishery, and Parks. If you go down and run into most of those deer biologists in the state of Mississippi, man, you'd be shooting the shit for hours on a tailgate, and it'd be like talking to your hunting buddy. But they are constantly in the public, at the hunt clubs, at the meetings, engaging with the universities. Like, they're just at check stations. They're just there engaging. Shout out to Chad Stewart. I know we had him on Michigan not too long ago. Chad is one of the few deer biologists who has a dedicated Facebook page, that he can openly communicate with the public, and people will ask him questions on it, and he'll reply. But then there are agencies that these guys, the guys who are handling our resource in their hands, who are behind a closed door that we'll never talk to, and we'll never see. I think that's a problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough position. I mean, who wants to be in that position?
Everybody's an expert.
It's like being a politician. Like, what qualified person do you know that wants to be a politician besides maybe you?
I don't know about that. I don't want to be a politician.
Yeah,
I want to be in.
That's
the
the problem with
advocacy
politics in
seat.
general.
I want to be in the advocacy seat. I want to be in the seat that we're talking about, which is to sit in front of, the legislation and say, guys, all we're asking for is, as the people, as the Commonwealth who own the resource in the state of Pennsylvania or Ohio or Michigan or Wisconsin, give me the numbers. Let us just see them, put them in a wide open. This guy's going to twist them 5 different ways this Sunday.
I agree.
Doesn't matter.
There's no reason not to disclose that. I also am curious if we'll find it. Maybe it is somewhere.
Maybe. And that's great. Proves us wrong. Here it is.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to have that. And I do think there are states out there that do it. And so hopefully if you're in Missouri or you're Louisiana or you're Alabama or whatever, you can say, yeah, guys, here it is. This is it for the state of Alabama for 2021. Here's all the data points. Awesome, man. That's great. How about Michigan? How about Wisconsin? How about Minnesota? Don't know. Find it. Tell us, and let's talk about it.
Fair enough.
Be a cool way. So yeah. Anyways, short podcast this week. Apologize for that. We kind of we kind of had Jeremy Eldridge planned here. Jeremy's going to come back, I think, on March 1st for a podcast. So we figured we would still get one in this week to kind of prelude to what we think is going to be a big one with Brian Burham next week from Pennsylvania Game Commission. But as always, guys, appreciate it. No homework assignment, but take what Jared and I talked about this week and dig for some numbers and see what you got, and tell us about your own experiences. Somebody may call up and they're like, "Hey, yeah, I know Mike Tonkovich from Ohio, and I see him all the time. Like, you guys just need to reach out to him." Cool, we'll do it. And that's that. This is the discussions that we get excited about because I think as a community we're making progress. So, anyways, that's kind of it for this week. And we will catch you next week with Brian Burham, Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Game Commission.
Later.
Take me